Street photography can be both very rewarding and frustrating at the same time. You head out with the hope to capture something unique and amazing, only to come back with photos that look uninspiring and boring. And this is something I had to learn the hard way. I started with street photography about 10 years ago when online resources on how to get started were limited. I mostly had to rely on myself, spending countless of hours experimenting with my camera and basically reinventing the wheel every time. Progress was slow, and there were many months in a row that I didn't see any improvement at all in my photography. There were even times that I even thought to sell my camera and quit street photography for good. On the other hand, nowadays the internet is flooded with YouTube tutorials, online courses, and tons of information on how to get started, which can be both very intimidating and confusing. You soak up every advice you find online, but sometimes you still can't crack the code of getting great shots. It can be as overwhelming now as it was isolating back then. That's exactly what inspired me to make this video. My goal today is to share with you 5 lessons that I wish someone had shared with me when I was starting with street photography. And before we continue, smash that like and subscribe button, especially if you want to see more videos like this. Alright, without losing any more time, let's start with the first lesson for the day. I can't overstate how important it is to work with one focal length for a certain period of time. And I'm one that for years I refused to follow this very advice. Needless to say, this is one of the things I regret the most. For some weird reason, I thought that I always had to adjust the focal length to properly frame the shot instead of repositioning myself. That thing not only slowed me down because I had to adjust the focal length every time I had to take a shot, but it also made my shots look very uninspiring and boring. For example, I would use 50mm in a scene that would have benefited from a wider angle. Once I committed myself to one focal length, I saw huge improvement in my photography within days. Using one focal length not only helps you remove the decision making from the shooting process, but it also helps you laser focus on a certain perspective and forces you to put all your efforts on improving that certain viewpoint. But how do you pick a focal length, especially when you're starting with street photography? There are 2 approaches you can follow here. First, use a kit lens or a zoom lens you may already have and go out and shoot freely. Then analyze which focal length you use the most and commit to that. And second, which is actually my favorite approach, review the photos from artists you like and then use this focal length as a starting point for your photography. Once you decide which focal length you want to use, get yourself a prime lens and use this for several weeks in a row or until you see noticeable improvement in your photography. The benefit of using prime lens is that there are no alternatives or shortcuts. You're stuck with one focal length and that forces you to be more intentional on how you frame the scene and how you photograph. If your budget is limited or you can't find the prime you're looking for, you can always use your zoom lens and force yourself to commit to one focal length by, for example, duct taping and locking the focal length. This might not work for everyone, but it's something you can try, especially if your budget is tight. There is so much information out there about what you should do or shouldn't do that is honestly overwhelming and confusing. Topics like rule of thirds, leading lines, or framing techniques can be overwhelming, especially when you're starting with street photography. There are so many things to consider that honestly can block your creativity when you're out there shooting. This is also something I struggled with when I started with street photography. When I was out there shooting, instead of focusing on the moment, I was always on the lookout for negative space and leading lines, even in places where these things didn't exist. And that made me think that there was nothing good to capture in the first place. And by the way, don't get me wrong, it's important to understand these principles so you can apply them when the time is right. But just don't go out looking for them or force a photo out of them. These principles shouldn't be the driving factor before taking a photo. Basically, don't try to force a photo using them. Instead, focus on whatever is happening right in front of you and let the scene guide your composition. If it looks good at first glance, in most cases, it's something worth capturing. To keep things simple, in street photography, you only need to keep 2 things in mind. First, keep your scenes clean, which means your frame shouldn't be too cluttered or crowded. You can do this by choosing a clean background or just getting closer to your subject to avoid clutter in the image. If you are following more advanced techniques like layering, then make sure that each subject has its own space in the frame and they don't overlap with each other. And second, there should be a clear subject. That could be a person, a gesture, an expression, or a movement, something that shows that something interesting is taking place. And that's it. It's really simple as that. Make sure your images are not cluttered and make sure you include an interesting subject in your frame. This may be an important lesson and one that will dramatically help you improve your street photography. The goal here is to resist and block yourself from taking that simple photo that everyone takes. Shooting at the back of an alley with a couple of people passing by or shooting at people's backs are not photos that will remain in anyone's memory. these are actually simple photos that everyone would take and actually everyone takes. Instead, look for moments that spark curiosity, like facial expressions or interactions that grab the attention. Aim for moments that make the viewer pause and wonder what just happened or what's about to happen. That's where real street photography lives. Unless you're extremely lucky, a good shot usually requires some kind of effort from your side. For example, let's say you found the perfect spot with a great background, but no one else is around. You may need to wait until someone walks in with the right presence or posture before you take the shot. Or maybe you're in a crowded area where many people are chilling on their phones without anything special happening. That doesn't mean you should give up and go, since locations where people gather have great potential. Stay still and observe. Watch for interesting expressions or gestures, and when the time is right, start capturing. Try to work for your photos and capture something unique that most photographers wouldn't. There is nothing more rewarding than capturing a photo that you truly put effort into, rather than just clicking and moving on. When I started with street photography, there were so many times I was trying to set the perfect camera settings instead of focusing on the moment and capturing a great photo. For some reason, I believed that the more I control my camera settings, the better photographer I would become and the better my photos would look. The truth couldn't be more farther than that. When you're out on the streets, the most important thing is to focus on capturing the moment and not nailing the perfect camera settings. And trust me, a slightly blurry photo or noisy photo is better than no photo at all. The goal here is to automate and remove the decision making from as many camera settings as possible. That's why I currently use auto white balance, auto ISO, and I set a predefined set of values for shutter speed and aperture depending on the light conditions, then I only adjust the exposure compensation while I'm shooting. For example, when the light is good, in manual mode I would set shutter speed to 1,000 of a second, the aperture to f11, and both white balance and ISO to auto, with a max ISO value of 16400. With this setup, I basically only have to adjust the exposure compensation while I shoot. If light conditions change, then I will lower the shutter speed or aperture and then go back to messing only with exposure compensation as I shoot. Now, when it comes to focusing, there are various techniques you can use. The easiest one is to use a large autofocus area and let the camera decide for you. This may be the simplest way to focus, but it's also the least accurate, especially if you have multiple subjects in your frame. Another option is to use spot autofocus, so you can focus on the subject that you want and then reframe the scene. This gives more accurate results, especially if you have multiple subjects that you want to focus on, but it's not ideal when you need to react fast. The focusing technique that I think works best for street photography is zone focusing, and this is my preferred one. This is mostly used with manual focus lenses. With zone focusing, you basically predefine the distance you want to be in focus before you start shooting, and then work within that range. It's a more advanced technique and it may seem intimidating at first, but once you get the hang of it, it may be the most efficient way to focus. This is another piece of advice that I wish someone had given me when I was starting with street photography. In any creative field, whether it's art, photography, or music, it's crucial to study the work of those that came before you. This will help you understand what works, what makes something look good, and also help you set a bar of what you should be aiming for. This process eventually serves as a visual guidance, a reference of what you should be aiming for. When you have a clear goal in mind, it's always easier to reach it. And the same happens for street photography. When you're aiming for a certain visual style, it becomes easier and faster to get there. For example, one of the photographers that influenced the way I see life in the streets is Alex Webb. I'm especially a big fan of his layering technique and the way he positions multiple subjects in a frame. So I've challenged myself to go out and achieve a similar kind of framing and look. And even though my shots are nowhere near what Alex has managed to achieve, the process of analyzing his thinking and trying to work towards that style, it's incredibly rewarding. If you're serious about street photography, the key takeaway here is to do your research and review the work of the artist you resonate with before you go out and shoot. The internet is a great starting point here, so once you find the artist that you really like, you can dig into the backgrounds and portfolios. Back when I started, this was harder to do, but since now everything is accessible online, there are no excuses. Another great way to understand other artists' work is through photo books. There is just something about the physicality of a book and be able to hold a photo in your hands that really helps it stick in your mind. And even though I'm not the one that will tell you to go out and buy photo books like crazy, after all they cost money, I do believe that having few books readily accessible will have a positive impact in your photography. Alright, now that you have heard about all 5 lessons, how do you put this into practice? So starting today, make yourself the following simple plan. Choose the focal length that you like and only shoot with this one for the next 3 to 4 weeks. When you're out shooting, keep only 2 basic things in mind. Avoid cluttering your images and only shoot things that spark curiosity. Avoid taking the easy shots. If you see something that is too easy, don't take it. Avoid shooting people's back or random alleyways from afar. Automate and remove decision making from as many camera settings as possible. You can use the camera settings I shared earlier in my video. And finally, study the work of your favorite artists and try to imitate the shots that speak to you. I guarantee if you're consistent with these 5 steps, you will start seeing results within few weeks or even days, while having fun at the same time. By the way, if you like what you saw today, smash that like and subscribe button and let me know in the comments below what else you would like to see from this channel. And that's all for today, folks. Happy shooting and see you again next time.